The relationship between the Bible and the institution of slavery is a complex and often contentious topic, one that has been central to historical debates for centuries. Rather than presenting a single, unified condemnation or endorsement, the biblical texts reflect the social and legal norms of the ancient world, while simultaneously introducing principles that would ultimately challenge the very foundations of the practice. An examination of both the Old and New Testaments reveals a nuanced perspective. The Bible regulates slavery within its historical context, while also providing a theological framework that emphasizes the dignity and spiritual equality of all people. In the Old Testament, the law of Moses provides specific regulations governing slavery, distinguishing between different forms of servitude. A key distinction is made between Hebrew and non-Hebrew slaves. For Hebrews, slavery was often a temporary condition resulting from poverty or debt, functioning more as a form of indentured servitude. The laws stipulated that a Hebrew who sold themselves into slavery was to be freed after 6 years, or during the year of Jubilee, Exodus chapter 21, verse 2, Leviticus chapter 25, verses 39 to 42. These individuals were not to be treated as property, but as hired workers, and they retained a connection to their community. In contrast, the law permitted Israelites to acquire slaves from surrounding nations, and these individuals could be held as property and inherited by their children. Leviticus chapter 25, verses 44 to 46. However, even in this context, the Old Testament provided protections for slaves that were not typical of other ancient cultures. For example, a master who killed a slave was to be punished, and a master who permanently injured a slave, e.g., knocking out an eye or tooth, was required to set them free. Exodus chapter 21, verses 20 to 27. Furthermore, the law strictly condemned man-stealing, or kidnapping a person to sell them into slavery, prescribing the death penalty for the crime. Exodus chapter 21, verse 16. These regulations, while not abolishing the practice, demonstrate an attempt to mitigate its harshest abuses and inject a degree of humanity into the institution. The New Testament, written within the context of the Roman Empire where slavery was pervasive, does not issue an outright prohibition against the institution. Instead, it focuses on transforming the relationships between masters and slaves from within, based on the principles of Christian love and spiritual equality. The apostles Paul and Peter both give instructions to masters and slaves, calling on them to act in a manner befitting their new identity in Christ. Slaves are told to obey their masters as if serving Christ himself, while masters are commanded to treat their slaves with fairness and justice, knowing that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and that there is no partiality with him. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 9, Colossians chapter 4, verse 1. This instruction fundamentally redefines the relationship by introducing a higher authority, Christ, to whom both master and slave are accountable. The most profound challenge to the institution, however, is found in the theological declaration of spiritual equality. Paul's letter to the Galatians declares, "There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is no male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." Galatians chapter 3, verse 28. This statement, while not an immediate call for social revolution, establishes a radical spiritual truth, that in the eyes of God, the social hierarchies of the world are rendered meaningless. The story of Onesimus in the book of Philemon provides a powerful illustration of this principle in action. Paul, writing to a Christian slave owner, Philemon, asks him to receive his runaway slave, Onesimus, back no longer as a slave, but more than a slave, as a beloved brother. Philemon chapter 1, verse 16. This appeal elevates Onesimus from a piece of property to a member of the family of God, a brother in Christ, thereby challenging the very essence of the master-slave relationship. In conclusion, the Bible's teaching on slavery cannot be summarized by a simple for or against. The Old Testament provides a legal framework that regulated a system of servitude, placing limits on its duration and severity, particularly for fellow Israelites. The New Testament, while not explicitly calling for the abolition of the institution, introduces revolutionary principles of spiritual equality and mutual accountability before God. These principles, particularly the idea that all believers are one in Christ, and that masters should treat their slaves as brothers, provided the theological foundation for later abolitionist movements. The Bible's complex and evolving treatment of slavery thus reflects a historical reality, while simultaneously introducing a transformative theological vision that ultimately undermines the moral legitimacy of the institution itself.